The ship landed with a soft hum on the metal floor of Station Verath 7, Una. Park stood up from her seat and took a deep breath. She looked through the small window at the massive station outside. It was bigger than anything she had ever seen. Metal towers reached up into the dark sky. Lights blinked everywhere like stars that had fallen to the ground. She was the first human to ever come here. The first human accepted into the Galactic Coalition's Joint Species Combat Training Program. Back on Earth, they had called her a hero. They had put her face on the news. But here she was nothing. She was less than nothing. She was a newcomer from a small blue planet that most species had never even heard of. The door of the ship opened. Cold air rushed in and hit her face. Una picked up her bag and walked down the ramp. A tall creature stood waiting for her. He had gray fur covering his entire body. His face looked like a Volf from Earth, but his eyes were golden and filled with intelligence. He stood on two legs and wore a military uniform with many medals on his chest. His name was Commander Revik, and he was a Vorath. The Vorath were famous across the galaxy. They were the best ground soldiers anyone had ever seen. They fought in packs. They were loyal until death. And they did not like outsiders. Commander Revik looked at Una with cold eyes. He did not speak. He simply turned and began walking. Una understood. She was supposed to follow. They walked through long hallways made of dark metal. Other species passed by them. Some were tall and thin with blue skin. Others were short and covered in hard shells like insects. A few looked almost like humans, but with extra arms or strange colored eyes. All of them looked at Una. Some laughed quietly. Others shook their heads. She heard whispers as she passed. That is the human? So small? So weak? They live such short lives? What is the point of training one? Una kept her eyes forward. She did not react. She had faced worse back home. She had survived war. She had buried friends. Words could not hurt her. Commander Revik stopped in front of a large door. He pressed his paw against a glowing panel, and the door slid open. This is your room, he said. His voice was deep and rough. Training begins tomorrow at first light. Do not be late. I will not wait for you. He turned and walked away without another word. Una stepped into the room. It was small and simple. A bed, a desk, a window that looked out into space. She put her bag on the bed and sat down. For a moment, she let herself feel tired. She let herself feel scared. Then she pushed those feelings away. She had a job to do. The next morning came fast. Una woke before the alarm and put on her training uniform. It was gray and tight, designed for movement. She tied her black hair back and looked at herself in the mirror. You can do this, she said to herself. She walked to the training hall. It was a huge open space with high ceilings. Hundreds of soldiers from different species stood in neat rows. Una found her place at the back. She was the only human in the entire hall. Commander Revik stood at the front on a raised platform. He gave a long speech about honor and duty and the history of the training program. Una listened carefully, but she also looked around at the other soldiers. Most of them were Vorath. They stood proud and tall, their fur ranging from gray to black to brown. They looked like a pack of wolves ready for the hunt. After the speech, they were divided into training groups. Una was placed with a young Vorath named Korin. He was smaller than the others, with dark brown fur and a scar across his nose. When he saw that his partner was a human, his ears went flat against his head. This is a joke, Korin said. I am paired with the weakest species in the galaxy. Una looked at him calmly. I am Una. Nice to meet you. Korin growled and walked away to the training area. Una followed. The first day was hard. They ran through obstacle courses. They fought with training weapons. They studied battle tactics on glowing screens. Una was slower than the others. She was not as strong. But she did not give up. When she fell, she got back up. When she failed, she tried again. At the end of the day, her body was covered in bruises. Her muscles screamed with pain. But she had survived. As she walked back to her room, she passed by a large window. On the other side was a bright room filled with soft light. She stopped and looked inside. It was a nursery. Small Voroth cubs played inside. They had fluffy fur and big eyes. They tumbled over each other, biting and playing. They looked like puppies, but smarter. More aware, Una smiled. They were cute, then something strange happened. One of the cubs stopped playing. It turned and looked directly at her through the glass. Its small tail began to wag. Then another cub looked. And another. Soon, all 7 cubs in the room were pressed against the glass, staring at her. Their tails wagged so fast they became a blur. A Voroth handler inside the room looked confused. She tried to call the cubs back, but they would not move. They kept staring at Una with wide, happy eyes. Una did not understand. She raised her hand and gave a small wave. The cubs went crazy. They jumped and howled and scratched at the glass. The handler looked at Una through the window. Her face was filled with shock and something else. Something like fear. Una lowered her hand and quickly walked away. Her heart was beating fast. She did not know what had just happened, but she had a feeling that her life on this station was about to become much more complicated. The days turned into weeks. Una trained harder than she had ever trained in her life. Every morning she woke before the sun. Every night she fell into bed with aching bones and tired eyes. But slowly she began to improve. Corin was still cold to her. He spoke only when necessary. He never helped her when she struggled. But Una noticed that he had stopped insulting her. Sometimes when she did something impressive, she caught him watching her with a strange look in his golden eyes. The other species still laughed at her. They called her names. They said she would fail. But Una did not fail. She learned their fighting styles and found ways to beat them. She studied their weaknesses. Humans were not the strongest or the fastest, but they were clever. They could adapt. They could survive. One night, after a particularly hard training session, Una walked past the nursery again. She had avoided it since that first strange day. But tonight, her feet carried her there without thinking. The cubs were sleeping. They lay in a pile of soft fur, their small bodies rising and falling with each breath. Una stood at the window and watched them. They looked peaceful. Then one cub opened its eyes. It was the smallest one, with gray fur and a white spot on its chest. It saw Una and immediately stood up. Its tail began to wag. It let out a small howl. The other cubs woke up. One by one they saw her. And one by one they ran to the glass. A door behind Una opened. She turned around and saw an old Voroth standing there. This one was different from the others. Her fur was white with age. Her eyes were cloudy, but filled with wisdom. She wore simple robes instead of a military uniform. "You are the human," the old Voroth said. Her voice was soft and slow. "Yes," Una said. "I am sorry. I did not mean to disturb the cubs." The old Voroth walked to the window and looked at the cubs. They were still pressed against the glass, their eyes fixed on Una. "My name is Elder Vosa," the old one said. "I have lived for 200 years. I have seen many things, but I have never seen this. I do not understand why they react to me this way," Una said honestly. Elder Vosa was quiet for a long moment. "Neither do I, but I intend to find out." She turned and walked away, leaving Una alone with the cubs. 3 days later, something happened that changed everything. It was a normal training day. All the soldiers were in the main hall, practicing combat drills. Una was fighting against a large insect-like creature when suddenly alarms began to scream. Red lights flashed everywhere. "Security breach," a voice announced. "Nursery wing." All personnel respond. The training stopped. Everyone looked at each other in confusion. Then Commander Revik came running into the hall. "The nursery gates have opened," he shouted. "The cubs are loose. Find them, now." Soldiers ran in every direction. Una joined the search. She ran through hallways and checked empty rooms. Her heart was pounding. Cubs could get hurt. They could get lost. She turned a corner and stopped. 7 small cubs stood in the middle of the hallway. They were looking directly at her. The moment they saw her, they ran. But they did not run away. They ran toward her, they crashed into her legs and jumped at her body. They licked her hands and face. They made happy sounds and wagged their tails so hard their whole bodies shook. Yuna fell to her knees, overwhelmed by the small, furry bodies surrounding her. "What is happening?" she whispered. Footsteps approached. She looked up and saw Commander Revik standing at the end of the hallway. Behind him stood dozens of Vorath soldiers. They all stared at her with shock on their faces. Elder Vasa pushed through the crowd. She walked slowly toward Yuna and the cubs. Her old eyes were wide. "By the Ancient Ones," she breathed. "It is true." Commander Revik stepped forward. His face was twisted with anger. "This is wrong. This is unnatural. What has this human done to our cubs?" "I did nothing," Yuna said. She tried to stand, but the cubs would not let her go. They clung to her uniform and whined when she moved. "The cubs chose her," Elder Vasa said. Her voice was filled with wonder. "They ran past hundreds of Vorath. They ran past their own handlers. They ran to her." "That is impossible," Commander Revik growled. "Cubs do not choose outsiders. Cubs do not choose anyone except their pack. And yet here we are." Elder Vosa knelt down and looked at the cubs. They glanced at her but immediately turned back to Yuna. "I must study this. I must understand." She stood and looked at Yuna with strange new respect. "Until then, you will continue your training. But you will also visit the cubs every day. They need you. I do not want special treatment," Yuna said. "This is not special treatment. This is necessity. If you do not visit them, they will break free again. They will find you. They will not stop until they are near you." Yuna looked down at the cubs. The smallest one, the gray one with the white spot, was sleeping against her leg. Its small paws twitched as it dreamed. She did not understand any of this. She did not know why these small creatures loved her so much. But as she looked at their peaceful faces, she felt something warm growing in her chest. "Okay," she said quietly. "I will visit them." Elder Vasa nodded. Commander Revik turned and stormed away without a word. Yuna stayed on the floor with the cubs, until they finally agreed to return to the nursery. As she watched them go, the smallest one looked back at her. It let out a soft howl. Yuna smiled. "See you tomorrow," she whispered. She did not notice Korin watching from the shadows. His expression had changed. The coldness was gone. In its place was something new, curiosity, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of respect. Elder Vasa sent a message to Earth. She asked for a scientist who knew about human biology. 2 weeks later, a ship arrived carrying Dr. Taiho Kim. Taiho was a tall man with kind eyes and messy hair. He studied how different species interacted with each other. He had spent his whole life trying to understand the connections between life forms across the galaxy. When he heard about the cubs and Yuna, he dropped everything and came immediately. "This is incredible," Taiho said when he first saw Yuna with the cubs. They were in the nursery, and all 7 cubs were piled on top of her. The smallest one, whom Yuna had named Cloud because of his white chest spot, was sleeping on her lap. I have read about bonds between different species, but nothing like this. For the next month, Taiho ran tests. He studied Yuna's blood. He measured her body heat. He recorded the sounds her heart made. He compared everything to the Vorath biology. Yuna continued her training during this time. She was getting stronger, faster. The other species had stopped laughing at her. They had seen her fight. They had seen her survive things that should have killed her. Humans were weak, yes, but they were also stubborn beyond reason. Korin had started talking to her more. Not friendly conversations, but real words. He gave her advice during training. He warned her about difficult exercises. Once, when she twisted her ankle during a run, he slowed down so she would not fall behind. "Why are you helping me?" Yuna asked him one day. Korin did not answer for a long time. Then he said, "The cubs like you?" Cubs are never wrong about people. It was not a perfect answer, but it was a start. One evening, Taiho called a meeting. Commander Revik, Elder Vasa, Yuna, and several high-ranking Vorath officers gathered in a conference room. Taiho stood at the front with a screen behind him. "I have found the answer," he said. His voice shook with excitement. "It took weeks, but I finally understand why the cubs are drawn to Yuna." He pressed a button and images appeared on the screen. They showed heat patterns and waveforms and chemical structures. "Humans have a unique combination of biological traits," Taiho explained. "First, we produce specific chemicals through our skin. These chemicals are similar to the ones Vorath mothers produce when they care for their cubs. Second, human body temperature is perfect for Vorath cubs. We are warmer than most species, but not too hot. Third, and this is the most interesting part, human hearts produce a specific electromagnetic pattern." He pressed another button. A sound filled the room. It was a slow, steady beat, thump, thump, thump. "This is a human heartbeat," Taiho said. "And this dot, dot, dot." He pressed another button. A second sound played. It was almost identical to the first. "This is a recording from ancient Vorath texts. It is called the heartbeat of the first pack mother." The room went silent. Elder Vasa stood up slowly. Her whole body was shaking. "That cannot be. What is the first pack mother?" Yuna asked. Elder Vasa did not answer immediately. She walked to the window and looked out at the stars. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. 10,000 years ago, our species almost died. A great sickness swept through our world. Adult Vorath could survive it, but cubs could not. Millions of cubs died. We were facing extinction." She turned back to face the room. "Then she came. The first pack mother. Our ancient texts say she fell from the sky. She was not Vorath. She had no fur, no fangs, but she had warmth. She cared for the sick cubs when no one else could touch them. Her presence alone seemed to heal them." "A being not of fur and fang," Taiho quoted from his research, "who came from the stars and carried the warmth of 1,000 suns in her chest." "We always thought it was a story," Elder Vasa said. "A myth, a tale to give our people hope." She looked at Yuna with new eyes. "But the cubs know. They feel it in their bones. Their instincts recognize her. To them, Yuna is not just a human. She is the pack mother returned." Commander Revik slammed his fist on the table. "This is nonsense. Fairy tales and children's stories. I will not accept this." "The science does not lie," Taiho said calmly. "Human biology matches the descriptions perfectly. I cannot explain how or why, but the connection is real." Commander Revik stood up. His golden eyes burned with anger. "Then we will test it. If this human is truly worthy of our ancient legends, she will prove it." He looked directly at Yuna. "I challenge you to Corveth." The room gasped. Even Elder Vasa looked shocked. "Revik, no," she said. "Corveth is our most difficult trial. It was designed for Vorath warriors. A human cannot. If she fails, she leaves this station forever," Commander Revik interrupted. "The cubs will be reconditioned. They will forget her. Everything will return to normal." Yuna stood up. Her heart was pounding, but her voice was steady. "And if I pass?" Commander Revik laughed bitterly. "No human could ever pass Corveth, but if I do?" The commander stared at her for a long moment. "Then I will accept you as a true warrior, and the cubs will be yours." Yuna nodded. "I accept." Elder Vasa closed her eyes and sighed. Taiho looked worried. Korin, standing in the back of the room, watched Yuna with something new in his expression. It was not just respect anymore. It was admiration. The shuttle dropped Yuna on the frozen moon of Vareth 7. She stood in knee-deep snow and watched the ship fly away until it became a small dot in the gray sky. Then she was alone. Corveth. The trial of worthiness. She had 3 days to cross 50 kilometers of frozen wilderness, find a sacred relic hidden in an ancient temple, and return to the extraction point. If she did not arrive in time, she would be left behind to die. The wind hit her like a wall of ice. Yuna pulled her thermal suit tighter and began walking. The first day was the hardest. The cold cut through her suit like knives. Every breath burned her lungs. Snow fell so thick she could barely see 10 steps ahead. She walked until her legs screamed for rest, then she walked some more. As night fell, the temperature dropped even lower. Yuna knew she would die if she stayed outside. She found a small cave in the side of a hill and crawled inside. Using her survival kit, she built a tiny fire and melted snow for water. She ate half of her emergency food and tried to sleep. Sleep did not come easily. The wind howled outside like a hungry animal. Yuna lay in the darkness and thought about the cubs. She thought about Cloud, the smallest one, with his white chest and big eyes. She thought about how he always fell asleep in her lap, how he cried when she left the nursery. "I will not fail them," she whispered to herself. "I will not." The second day began before sunrise. Yuna packed her things and continued through the snow. Her map showed she was halfway to the temple. She pushed forward. Around midday, she found the first defense system. It was a robotic guardian built to protect the path to the temple. It was the size of a car with metal legs and a glowing red eye. When it saw Yuna, it charged. Yuna ran. She could not fight something that big, but she could outsmart it. She led the guardian toward a frozen lake and jumped across the thin ice. The machine followed. Its heavy body broke through the ice and it sank into the freezing water below. Yuna did not stop to celebrate. She kept moving. By the end of the second day, she reached the temple. It was an ancient building made of black stone, half buried in snow and ice. More guardians patrolled outside. Yuna counted 5 of them. She waited until dark. Then she moved. Humans were not strong. Humans were not fast. But humans were clever. Yuna had learned to use shadows. She had learned to move without sound. She slipped past the guardians one by one, using tricks she had developed during her years as a soldier on Earth. Inside the temple, she found the relic. It was a small crystal that glowed with soft blue light. It fit perfectly in her palm. She put it in her bag and began the journey back, but the temple had one final trap. As she exited, a hidden guardian activated. It was faster than the others. It caught her before she could run. The machine's metal claw grabbed her leg and threw her against a wall. Yuna heard something crack. Pain exploded through her body. She fell into the snow and could not get up. The guardian approached. Its red eye glowed in the darkness. Yuna looked at it. She thought about giving up. She was so tired, so cold. Every part of her body hurt. Then she thought about the cubs again. She thought about their happy faces, their wagging tails, the way they trusted her completely. She was not going to die here. With all her strength, she grabbed a sharp rock from the ground. When the guardian came close, she jammed the rock into its eye. The machine screamed with electric noise and fell backward. It crashed into the snow and stopped moving. Yuna crawled away. Her leg was broken. She could not walk, but she could crawl. She crawled through the snow for hours. The cold was eating her alive. Her vision blurred. Her thoughts became slow and confused. But she did not stop. On the third night, she finally collapsed. She was still 5 kilometers from the extraction point. Too far, she could not make it. The snow began to cover her body like a white blanket. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I tried." She closed her eyes. Footsteps, heavy footsteps in the snow. Yuna forced her eyes open. A dark shape stood above her. At first she thought it was another guardian. Then the shape knelt down and she saw a familiar face. Corin. "You," she breathed. "Stupid human," Corin said. But his voice was not angry. It was scared. "You were supposed to die. Everyone said you would die. Why are you here?" Corin did not answer. He picked her up and put her on his back. His fur was warm against her frozen skin. He began to run through the snow. "Commander Revik will punish you," Yuna said weakly. "You broke the rules?" "I do not care about the rules," Corin growled. "The cubs chose you?" "I trust the cubs." "And I—" He paused. "I trust you." Yuna did not have the strength to respond. She rested her head against his warm back and let darkness take her. She woke up at the extraction point. The shuttle was landing. Medical officers rushed toward her with equipment and worried faces. Corin set her down gently in the snow. She reached into her bag and pulled out the crystal. It was still glowing. "I did it," she said. "I completed Corveth." Corin smiled. It was the first time she had ever seen him smile. "Yes, human," he said. "You did." Yuna spent 2 weeks in the medical bay. The doctors fixed her broken leg and treated her frostbite. They said she should have died. The cold should have killed her. The injuries should have killed her. But somehow she had survived. "Humans are strange creatures," one doctor said to another. "They do not know when to give up." When Yuna was finally strong enough to walk, she found a crowd waiting outside the medical bay. Soldiers from all 12 species stood in the hallway. They did not laugh at her anymore. They did not call her weak. They stood in silence and watched her with respect. Corin was waiting at the front. He had been punished for breaking the rules of Corveth. Commander Revik had taken away his rank and given him extra duties for 6 months. But Corin did not seem to care. When he saw Yuna, he straightened his back and saluted. "Welcome back, warrior," he said. Yuna smiled. "Thank you for saving me. You saved yourself. I just carried you a little bit." They walked together through the station. Soldiers moved aside to let them pass. Yuna heard whispers, but they were different now. Not mockery, admiration, the human completed Corveth. "No outsider has ever done that. She is truly one of us." They stopped outside the nursery. Through the glass, Yuna could see the cubs. They were playing together, tumbling and biting each other like always. But the moment she appeared, they froze. All 7 heads turned toward her. Then they went crazy, they howled. They jumped. They scratched at the glass. Cloud, the smallest one, was crying. Actually crying, with real tears running down his furry face. Yuna pressed her hand against the glass. Cloud pressed his small paw against the other side. "I missed you too," she whispered. A voice spoke behind her. "Sergeant Park." Yuna turned. Commander Revik stood there. His face was hard to read. He looked at her for a long moment without speaking. Then he did something she never expected. He bowed. "I was wrong about you," Commander Revik said. "I thought humans were weak. I thought you were a mistake. But you proved me wrong. You completed Corveth. You earned your place here." He stood straight and looked at her with new eyes. "I formally accept you as a warrior of the Vorath." Yuna bowed in return. "Thank you, Commander." But Elder Vasa was not finished. She appeared from around the corner, walking slowly with her white fur glowing under the lights. Behind her came dozens of Vorath soldiers, all dressed in ceremonial robes. Dr. Taiho was there too, watching with wide eyes. "Accepting her as a warrior is not enough," Elder Vasa said. Her voice was strong despite her age. "This human has done more than pass a test. She has fulfilled an ancient prophecy. The cubs chose her. She answered their call. She proved her worth through blood and pain." She stopped in front of Yuna and took her hands. 10,000 years ago, the first Pack Mother saved our species. Today, her spirit lives again. Elder Voss's eyes were wet with tears. "I give you the title that has not been spoken in 3,000 years. She raised her voice so everyone could hear. "From this day forward, you are Kalvora, Pack Mother. Guardian of cubs? Sister to all Vorath?" The soldiers around them dropped to one knee. Even Commander Revik knelt. The only sound was the cubs howling with joy behind the glass. Yuna did not know what to say. Her throat was tight. Her eyes were burning. She had come to this station as an outsider. A joke? A weak human from a forgotten planet. Now she was Pack Mother. Elder Vasa opened the nursery door. The cubs burst out like a flood of fur and happiness. They crashed into Yuna's legs and climbed up her body. Cloud somehow ended up on her shoulder, licking her face and making happy sounds. Yuna laughed. For the first time since arriving on the station, she laughed without holding back. "I guess I have a family now," she said. Corin walked over and stood beside her. The cubs sniffed at him and decided he was acceptable. One of them bit his tail playfully. "We are your pack now," Karin said. "Wherever you go, we go. Whatever you fight, we fight." Yuna looked at him. Then she looked at the cubs. Then she looked at the hundreds of soldiers who had knelt for her. She had left Earth alone. She had arrived on this station with nothing but a bag and a dream. Now she had something she had never expected to find, a home. Years later, stories spread across the galaxy. They told of a human commander who led 7 Vorath warriors into battle. They called her unit the Pack. They said her soldiers would die for her without question. They said she had never lost a battle. Enemies who faced her whispered warnings to each other. "Do not fight the Pack Mother. Do not hurt her cubs. If you do, she will find you, and she will not show mercy." But the most beautiful stories came from Vorath nurseries across 100 worlds. Caretakers noticed something strange happening. Whenever human visitors came to the stations, the cubs would stop playing. They would run to the glass and press their noses against it. They would wag their tails and make happy sounds. The caretakers did not understand. But the cubs understood. They were waiting, waiting for the warmth, waiting for the heartbeat, waiting for their pack mother to come home, and somewhere in the galaxy. Aboard a ship flying between stars, Yuna Park sat with 7 grown Vorath warriors sleeping around her. Cloud, no longer a cub but still her favorite, rested his head on her lap. She stroked his fur and looked out at the stars. "Thank you," she whispered to the universe, "for giving me a family." Cloud's tail wagged in his sleep. Outside the window, the stars shone bright and endless, and the Pack Mother smiled.